wanted to ask you guys about an apparent, the claim and spin, backdoor plan to privatise TAFE. Sounds like something normally Labor and the unions would say, right? But this potentially happening in New South Wales, where supposedly what it would be was that private companies would be able to get in and start to, well, help inform the curriculum and also run courses. A little bit like, say, universities do with, say, the Confucius Institute. Sorry, Nicholas. But what's your sense on this here? Do you believe that there is any attempt to backdoor privatise, or is this what you do when you've only got, you know, $1 million for TAFE and the real cost's 1.5? What's your thought on this?
Look, I think the problem is that with the policies that have been in place for a long time, we have hollowed out our skills base.
Correct.
The middle class used to be our tradies. And the number of people who were in the professional class and tradies were about the same and made up the sort of middle class society that we have. But since the 70s, that has changed dramatically. And we've hollowed out our skills base so that the growth in jobs have been either at the top white collar end or at the no or low skilled end. And quite frankly, we are filling up the need for that middle section by importing people.
Correct.
So this TAFE question is actually a very serious issue indeed, because there are plenty of areas where courses have been privatised, where private institutions can carry out testing for certain qualifications. And quite frankly, I think we do need a strong TAFE system. And just as we have governments running universities, there is a need to have, in my view, in this country, some government involvement in TAFEs. We only have two private universities, in Notre Dame and in Bond. So I just think we have to do a total rethink. And I listened to Jerry Harvey this morning, and he was saying how they have fostered Australian-made furniture, and that there is an opportunity for them to actually expand and for more people to use Australian-made furniture. And I think there's a lesson in that in so many areas. We are far too dependent on China. This has got to be a wake-up call for us. And I think we have to do a whole rethink about looking after Australia first. Just as Trump has said he's looking after America first, I think we need to be doing that for ourselves. And I think this TAFE question is, again, a wake-up call for what we have done to the hollowing out of our workforce.
Nick, I may have poorly explained it, but what do you think of this potential situation in New South Wales?
Well, look, let me start by just picking up a couple of points that Bronwyn made. I mean, she told a sort of folksy, popular story about Australia's skills hollowing out, and I'm sure a lot of people believe that because it sort of sounds like a good story, but it's just not true.
The statistics
in fact,
bear it
Australians
out,
have
Nicholas.
never been... Well, in fact, they don't. Australians have never been as skilled and well-trained as they are today. Australia is the most educated people they've ever been.
You're counting Bachelor of Arts degrees.
Now, moving on to whether TAFEs should be privatised, I don't think that would be a good idea. I think Australia has a very strong tertiary education system, including TAFEs and our universities. I do think there are challenges for our TAFE sector, but I don't think privatising is the answer. We don't want to go down that US route where they have a largely privatised tertiary education sector. That's not been to the good of the American workforce, in my view. However, there is some scope for involving industry, obviously, and you should encourage industry to be involved in the TAFE sector, but you need to put proper guardrails around this. It seems to me that the New South Wales government is putting in place proper guardrails, but I do think Labor and Greens are right to scrutinise it and make sure there's checks and balances in place there.
Nicholas, I could recommend to you an excellent article in The Australian dated the 27th of February 2020, where the statistics are there. In the 1970s, Australia dominated the middle class. This was the heyday of Australian manufacturing, when 20% of the workforce was in manufacturing. In case you're wondering today, it's 6%. And if you go through where the jobs have been created, you'll find all that information nicely set out for you in that article, which I recommend to you. And
I don't
furthermore,
deny those.
She went into the
Nicholas,
TARDIS. She got you, Nick. She got you on the numbers.
Nicholas, look, the fact of the matter is,
Paul.
you know, you're
the
really
Gini
a caring
coefficient.
person, Nick. You're a caring person, and I think you respect tradies. And I think if you give away some of those awful socialist ideas you've got, you could really turn out to be a nicely well-informed person.
Put down the man bag. Put down the man bag, Nicholas.
I mean, quoting
happen to have it
statistics
with
about
me.
what sectors of the Australian workforce people are working in doesn't actually go to your original premise about the hollowing out of skills in the Australian workforce. So when I say Australians have never been more educated and more skilled, I'm correct, okay?
Because
when you say
hollowed
there's less
out the
people
middle,
working in
where we're
manufacturing,
lacking
you're
tradesman
correct,
skills.
okay? But because there's less people working in manufacturing doesn't mean your first proposition that people are less educated is right. In fact, the two do not go together, okay?
I think Paul.
Yeah,
I think Bronny's given Nick a good lesson in life, and I think Nick could do well to listen to.
I agree. Just put down the man bag, mate.
Can I just say this? I'm still waiting for the Turnbull government to privatise Medicare.
Oh, yeah.
What happened to that?
Yeah,
What
correct.
happened to that?
Correct.
No, the New South Wales government is not trying to privatise TAFE. This is an old Labor war horse they drag out when they've got nothing else to say. You know, the Berejiklian government has done a great job in the last few months. They drag this hoary old chestnut out. Oh, scare your jobs at risk. But by the way, is there a problem in parts of the private sector running educational services? Absolutely no problem whatsoever. And Bronny correctly mentioned Notre Dame and Bonn University, which are two outstanding educational institutions. But this is just the old Labor, you know, drag it up from Playbook 101. What are we going to say today? Oh, well, let's run that old Medicare privatisation thing, cross out Medicare and put in TAFE, you know.